All right, so if we talked about last time the introduction of the Chicago School approach to sociology that involve going through Chicago and studying the different ways that people interact with their environment. You all have to talk about symbolic interactionism in your papers, and it talks about again how obviously a lot of the first half of this chapter talked about how the environment affects individuals. An urban environment affects individuals, and it does, but also the way that urbanites experience living in the city. So looking, going, from the bottom, you have many people that live in the suburbs that um, work in the city. Again, like so, the place I live right now, Rock Hill, is in many ways a sub. Even though it's in South Carolina, is in many ways a suburb of Charlotte. That most people live here. And like I said, when I would be heading south towards Columbia in the morning, I would see this gang of people flooding into Charlotte. And in days when I've had to go into Charlotte, like the traffic will be pretty maddening around 8 a.m. I mean, that's true in most cities. The greater Atlanta area, for example, um, many people live in the outskirts. Chicago, certainly this way increasingly, particularly as we'll talk about, as the cost of living goes up in many of these cities, it becomes more difficult to live in the urban center, but people still want to work and play there. But you also have the trapped and downwardly mobile, where many people just can't leave. Like one of the things that, again, like people talked about in terms of Hurricane Katrina is, well, why don't people just leave? A whole bunch of people don't have that option. The choice of leaving is related to your economic positioning. It's always really important to know. Almost everything in America is related to your economic positioning. So if natural disaster or catastrophe occurs, it's not just as easy to leave. Like again, may assume that everybody has like a cousin in Virginia or an uncle in Florida that they can go stay with for a while. Not everybody has that. So there are many people who, again, as we talked about, come to the cities for a wider job opportunity, but those opportunities don't always, um, either exist or are able to be maintained. So a lot of people, again, experience downward mobility where you just have generational poverty. Because again, and this is where we talked about before the Jim and Chef divide, where in a smaller town environment, if you're poor, you probably have a lot of people, that can look out for you. It's going to be less likely that, again, if you see somebody sleeping on the street in a small town, somebody probably knows that person. Somebody's going to take them in. In a big urban environment, you're often on your own. And even the people that you may know and have fellowship with, they're in survival mode so much themselves where it becomes difficult to aid and assist in the ways that you may want to. This leads to, again, many people being deprived within these urban environments. You have many ethnic villages, which we'll talk about, in a moment. And definitely we get into the section on enclaves and ghettos. You have many people that are unmarried or childless. Again, where one of the, particularly in the late 20th and early 21st century, but I think probably even there too, quite frankly, where people, again, like I said, they would come for job opportunities. So a lot of the men initially would come by themselves, and they might, if they have families, they might send for them later on, um, or marry there. But they would come again for work, much like we talked about in hunter and gathering times. If you didn't have proper resources to sustain yourself, it wouldn't necessarily be the most inviting. Coming to New York wouldn't be the most inviting place for a family at that time. So you had a lot of people that were unmarried and childless that live in the cities, and that remains true now. Um, it's a lot easier again if you're in a small town and you're not married or you don't have children. Oftentimes, particularly if you're a woman, there's a lot of social pressures put upon you, and you look at it in a certain way that's very different than in urban environments where, again, most people just are totally indifferent to what you do. And then finally, you have the cosmopolites. Again, people who, again, really try and take advantage of the full range of all the things the city have to offer. There are very few people in any city who get to do this. Again, many people, they work in the city and they just keep it moving. Um, and I'm sure this is probably true, in the big cities that you're from or live near. that I know so many people again that live in Chicago that in many ways have never seen Chicago. In terms of like all the touristy things that people will come out of town for. It's a lot of cool things there to do. But most people are so busy they haven't had a chance to really look at the Sears Tower or really take in the lakefront or different restaurants and museums and things of that nature. These things call it takes money, so we don't ever want to lose sight of that. But again, all these things are related to your economic positioning within the city. And we talked about again before, right? The divide between Jim and Chef and Jezel Chef, where you have this real community, framework in one sense, and then the other is defined by more individualism and a breakdown in social detachments. And while there is some of that, subcultural theory, and the theory again explains cause and effect, that there still is community within a place, within urban environments. The notion that there's not, would just be totally disingenuous. So the community, it might not always be based upon your family or your church group, or the type of work you do where, okay, we're all coal miners or we're all farmers. But as we talked about, many people have behaviors in rural environments, in smaller towns and groupings, that they wouldn't be able to fully express comfortably in some of these small towns. Again, if it's, a situation where, you talked about, getting pregnant out of wedlock, you're talking about, homosexuality, you're talking about, if somebody likes to drink or smoke, or have certain dietary differences that, the community may live in or the community from, that the city, again, it allows you a certain level of anonymity where you can just blend in and be yourself and nobody cares about, the strange habits that, or the fact that you may have children, you're not married, anything like that. Again, in an urban environment, people don't have the luxury to really care about those things that much. Again, not that there's not judgmental people, not that there isn't biases and prejudices, there are. It's just, things are moving a little bit too fast and too busy to be consumed by them. That allows it where people come to these environments and they found out that, hey, the things that made me different in my small town, there are actually a lot of people who are, similar in this big environment of New York and this big environment of Atlanta. Again, we talked about, transgender. Transgender folks, it may be, tough for them in a small North Carolina town. Atlanta, again, there's not an accident that, people are going to Atlanta because they can be themselves in that environment. Like I knew cats, again, growing up, who, turned out to be homosexual. We didn't know it at the time. Again, it was a very different time we were growing up in, and those things were very much kept, lock and key. Went down to Atlanta, that, was able to, live his best life, if you will. There was a wider gay Black community down there that didn't exist in many other parts of the country. I think, again, that's less true now. But again, people can find fellowship in that. Different religious groups, groups like, the Nation of Islam or the Hebrew Israelites, where again, if you're not, a Bible thumping Christian, you can still have, and again, most of these urban environments are overwhelmingly Christian. Church every block and a half, probably about 3 or 4, quite frankly. But you can still have a lot of different religious beliefs, even nuances within Christianity, where again, it's not just all, okay, everybody's Baptist or everybody's Presbyterian, like you may have in some areas. In New York City, you're going to have every possible Christian domination you can possibly imagine. It's probably like there are groups of atheists and things like that. I used to do a talk show in Chicago. We talk to people of different faiths to kind of get their various spiritual perspectives. Talked to Christian cats, some Muslim cats, some Jewish cats. We also actually had an atheist on the show, and he was, sharing with us, how there's a wide ranging atheist community. A subculture like hip hop, for example. Hip hop again had very unique values and norms that were very different from the wider population. In this way, again, so a subculture like hip hop could not have been born anywhere else but an urban environment that just kind of strives on those kind of differences. Um, and in that way, whenever I go to a city, Stephen, all across the world, one of the first things that I try and do is locate the local hip hop community. So again, these kind of things, whether you're hip hop, whether you're Jamaican, whatever the case, again, people will can find some community and fellowship within these wider cities in a way that might be more difficult in some smaller environments. We talked about that term before. Ecology speaks to environment. In urban ecology, it speaks to how the environment, social environment, social environment, social environment. We'll talk about the natural environment effects. Natural environment, again, if you live near a body of water, what the air quality is like. Here we're talking about social environments. What are the schools like? What is the crime like? What type of jobs are available? So, according to this view, it's economic competition for space that impacts the structure of communities and cities. Again, there's a saying, a slogan, a cliche, a New York minute, and it's a cliche, but there's truth in it, in that things are moving so very quickly. There's so many things to do in such little time, and there's so many other people that are trying to do the same thing. So housing, and good quality housing, even in 2021, remains very difficult to get in New York. So, if you get a nice apartment somewhere in New York City, people be staying there for generations, be dying there. So people will be true story, do your own research, but people will be like, okay, look, going to landlords, look here, Charles, I know you own this building. That dude in there is 88. As soon as he dies, I need you to call me and let me know that this apartment is available. Man, this would be perfect. I've been trying to find a spot like this, for 5 years. I ain't been able to find nothing in this price range because getting a housing is incredibly expensive. New York, San Francisco, Chicago are the most expensive cities in the country. But it's expensive in Chicago is New York and San Francisco are almost psychotic. Small little bitty amounts of housing can go for a whole bunch of money. That's why so many people be moving to Houston, Dallas, Phoenix, and places like that. But I make this point, and I got you 1 second, Charles, where you can hey, this apartment is open. If you ain't over there quick, 5 people are finna beat you out for it. So almost any and everything you could think of, there's just strict, hardcore economic competition. Think about this, again, even with the violence and stuff like that, the violence doesn't occur because people just rejoice in killing each other. It's mainly over drug competition and things like that. Again, there's so many people. There are huge markets in New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, DC, and the competition for that drug money would be fierce in the late 80s and the early 1990s, and people would do what they have to do. Again, this is why because this is even before crack hit, many of these areas, so again, were besieged by crime. I'm sure y'all know all about all the stories of Lucky Luciano, Al Capone, and all these cats. None of that was involving Black people. So these kind of things again have held true, and it's not that these people are just so necessarily evil. The environment puts you in a really cutthroat mindset where everybody's trying to get money as much as they possibly can all the time, and even if that have to come at the expense of you sometimes, people are okay with that. And what this speaks to is that when anybody gets in this environment, this is what kind of happens to your mentality. Charles Kinlaw.
So, going based back on what you said about the housing, do you think business owners, they systematically, or they literally plan okay, I know that people of a certain demographic or ethnicity or whether they're poor or not, they're going to need housing. So like they literally they put hotels, or they put certain locations or housing apartments in certain areas where they can gain extra money, even though the people gonna need to make money regardless. They know, like, okay, I know Black people in this area, they need somewhere to live. I know I will make like tons of money. Like, do you think that's something that like the larger cities do? Not saying that us in the South, we don't do that as well, but like down here, and I'm pretty sure it's different towards Chicago, hotels are like mad, like far away. When I used to be in Philadelphia to visit my grandma, there were always an apartment complex or somewhere. It was always like a certain distance between it. So I basically just trying to ask, do you think that has to do with anything, not necessarily with the economy, but like I guess with the city or the state trying to make more money, knowing that they can make money off of certain ethnicities with housing?
Well, yeah, I mean, economics always plays a role. Like, money is the lead domino in pretty much anything in America. And there's a lot of racism inherent in that. But I also believe that if many of these city planners and like private developers, because most of it is through private corporations, like Trump incorporated in places like that, not like the cities that are is involved in the building. Like the cities are involved in this public housing, and that's the projects, and we'll talk about that in great detail. But yeah, definitely, like there's always, like, one of the we talked about in social research and just in science in general, that one of the main aims of that is being able to predict and plan. And one of the things that I like hope that you all are getting across in some of these discussions is how, yeah, like, I mean, the people that run the world, like nothing. I was gonna say the people that run the world, but pretty much people that run any organization or unit, like things are very, very carefully planned out, and nothing is done by happenstance. Again, we just saw like the completion of something I didn't think was possible in September, the completion of a football season. Which when this began, I was like, oh hell no. I mean, I didn't think any of the seasons were going to be able to like get started. Like the NBA, I thought had a shot because they were isolating people. I thought what the NFL was trying to do in terms of like traveling and all of that, and then you got 50-some people. I thought that was going to be crazy. However, with proper planning, they were able to find a way. And why did they find a way? Because it was too much money for them not to.
I'd say, yeah.
So in this way, yeah, all types of things like this are thought out. And there's, because of the economic divides between Black and white people historically, there have definitely been some divides. But a lot of it has really been based on greed. I think that if there was and now that doesn't mean that there haven't been deliberate things done by financial companies in terms of like, hey, this is where the Black people got to live over here. We're not going to have no Black people live over here. But even that, a lot of it is tied to is explained away by economics. But the concentric zone hypothesis, and again, a hypothesis speaks to like a relationship between different variables. And it's kind of like, again, keep in mind, right, that most of what we're talking about here is ecology. And what do we mean when you hear that word ecology? What does that speak to again? When you hear the word ecology?
Economics or no, not economics, but
My fault, Bear. No, you can keep going, and then I'll go after you.
You got it, Chuck.
Does that deal with basically the surroundings of like organ or like of people, like how try to put it in words?
Yeah, basically their surroundings.
Yeah, I was trying to, yeah, you kind of.
Good. There's a one word that might encompass that. Also starts with an E.
Environment.
Yes. And again, these should not be things we got to guess about, because like if we're first of all, right, we're talking about urban ecology. It's right here, the first thing on the screen, the social environment. Again, I know this class is kind of early in the morning, but we have to be like, actually, like the brain waves got to be flowing. So yes, all of the whole chapter is talking about that. Look, you got this shock city. You got a lot of people coming to this place in a short amount of time. They ain't got the resources for that. It ain't buildings, it's housing. That's going to create a certain, that in itself is going to create a certain type of environment here in Chicago. Some of the things that they saw in this environment, they saw more suicides, they saw the divorce rate going up, they saw more child abuse, more juvenile delinquency. They don't believe that there's something in these people's genes that's making them behave this way. They believe it's something in their environment or surroundings that's making the people behave this way. This is what we refer to as urban ecology, which again, if you looked at the lecture that was recorded on Friday or read the material, all of this should be reviewed. And intelligent people, like, you should need to be able to see some concept like this, which is not very complicated. An intelligent adult should be able to see this 1, 2, maybe 3 times, and it should stick. If that's not sticking for y'all, you got to ask yourself some hard questions. Because I know y'all are intelligent. That's not the problem. It's just that we're not taking the time to look at this. And we're in February now. So time is moving very quickly. And such behavior is not acceptable in the least. This urban ecology, which again speaks to your environment and surroundings, creates what is called urbanism, where you get a certain state of mind from living in an environment such as Chicago or New York or Philadelphia, Detroit. Some of the ways that, again, it affects your state of mind is through, again, these ways of urban life that are expressed here. Again, these ain't just isolated notes. You got to see how these things are telling the story together. If y'all can't tell the story, y'all are not going to do well in the class. And if y'all can't tell these stories, you're not really learning and educating yourself. Y'all just going to class, giving folks money and getting a paper degree. That's not learning and education. And just because you got a degree that millions of other Americans got, millions of people across the world got, what are you going to do to distinguish yourself from all those other people's degrees? You need to be able to tell these stories effectively. It's not that difficult. You just got to want to do it. If you don't want to do it, there are many options out here for you in this country. So when we talk about urban ecology, again, it speaks to the environment. I hope I don't have to go over this again, because we're going to talk, like, it's informing pretty much the whole entire direction of the course. And in fact, it's infecting all of social sciences. The whole notion of social science is that people are a product of their environment. We ain't got that yet, seniors, really? So when they talk about, again, invasion and succession, and they're talking about communities, right? These concepts are written in italics for a reason. They're very important for you to study closely in the text. Invasion and succession. We'll come back to these concepts in a moment. But the concentric zone hypothesis is related to this notion of how the environment affects the individual. The concentric zone hypothesis is related to this notion that the environment affects the individual. And again, make sure that you're taking notes on the lecture, not just taking notes on what's on the screen, which half the time you haven't been able to remember 5 minutes later. So natural and man-made barriers are what define and organize the city. But you had economic competition, intense economic competition that determined the development of the city zones. In that way, Charles, is kind of speaking to the point you were making a moment ago, that economics began to drive the very structure and design of the city. These zones often will contain natural barriers. So in this way, right, that, we might need barriers to separate this group from this group, or this class of people from this class of people. So in many of these cities, there are natural barriers. And again, the cities are designed this way. Do your own research. So we're going okay, look, we're going to put this neighborhood over here near this river. We're going to put this neighborhood over this highway. So Charles, you asked about, where we're going to house all these Black poor people. In Chicago, again, we're not at this period yet. This is still the 1930s and 40s. We're going to get there. But eventually they begin to build housing projects. And the major highway in Chicago, the Dan Ryan Highway, one of the busiest, most dangerous highways in the country. That highway was built in the middle of on one side you have this white neighborhood that was called Bridgeport. Bridgeport is west. And then you would have the Robert Taylor homes in Bronzeville on the east. So Bronzeville, again, we talked about this before, is a historically Black neighborhood in Chicago. So they built like, huge project buildings that you could just like going on the highway, you just see them block after block after block after block after block. Almost all of those now in 2021, almost all of those projects have been torn down, but they pretty much define like, my entire childhood, and they were built in a very strategic way to ensure that white people didn't really have any reason whatsoever to go over there. And the cities would be designed this way all across the country. Let's look at these zones in more detail. Again, we talked about before, Stephen, that these cities were very deliberately designed in a way that kind of almost broke the city into sections. Now, keep in mind, again, don't just be writing while you're daydreaming and like doing other things. That the whole purpose of this is related to how these zones create different environments, and these environments are going to impact people differently. You're going to have different behaviors, almost different cultures in these different zones. And this is modeled. Burgess, again, these are scholars at the University of Chicago, and the whole purpose of this, right, is that people were saying like, these Italians, these Irish, these Polish people that are coming to Chicago, these Black people, they're just natural criminals. It's something in their blood, something in their culture. The University of Chicago scholars were not satisfied with this. That didn't make full sense to them. So they want to actually go out and study the environments that these people lived in. They want to study the environments that the people lived in. And through this, scholars such as Burgess and Park, they found that it was the environment that explained behavior more than anything else. And in this way, no matter who you put in these environments, your behaviors are going to be the same. Let's look at these very quickly. Again, this is based on, this model that Burgess identified here. It is built into other cities, but this model is based upon Chicago, Illinois, and it still holds true today. So first you have the Central Business District. So this would be, again, your downtowns. Downtown Atlanta, downtown New York, downtown New Orleans. So this would be, again, the Central Business District. This represents, Stephen, the most desired pieces of land in any city. And again, so like near the Panther Stadium, here in Charlotte, again, where there's, so when you talk about property being built up, that's mainly actually where you see like the buildings built up most, because that's where the most money is going to be at. You're almost always going to find people that want to live there. Some of these other areas, like, yeah, like we might fix some stuff up, but like it's nobody trying, like, sort of wild hundreds in Chicago. Like it's very few people that are deliberately trying to move there. No offense to anybody in the wild to see this. Don't shoot me when I come to the crib, dog. I don't know what to tell you. But the Central Business District, which is called the Loop in Chicago, it's called the Loop in Chicago. It's not called the Loop anywhere else. They call it the trains loop down and up in the midst of downtown. So you have recreational services, all the department stores. So, the Magnificent Mile is an area in Chicago where you have like a whole bunch of shopping. In New York City, this would be like, Broadway, Wall Street, and all that stuff. You also have a zone of transition. These are areas where the businesses may be expanded into. You may have some deteriorated buildings. And people who live here who have other options. Again, as we get in where we're drawing a picture here as it relates to Chicago and being familiar with it, we're going from north to south. We're going from north to south. So again, as you get further south, and if you ever, have the great privilege of, going to Chicago, again, you can drive on the street and you can see this quite visibly. It is almost like you go back in time the further south you go. So the zone of transition, like, it's not quite like, it's polished and pressed downtown, but nice areas. It's more of a residential type area. few buildings, but not like you see downtown in the central business district. Then you would have the working men's homes. These would be the children of immigrants. So this is where we talked about before, where you would have your Greek town, your Little Italy, Bronzeville, where a lot of, again, for the central business district to work, you had to have a lot of workers. But most of those workers, Charles, at the end of the workday, they would go home back into their respective communities. Again, like you will see in most cities today. The residential zone, again, middle-class homes and nice apartments. You know, again, further outside the city. So this is where, you know, again, going south where the south side of Chicago, again, that's where most of the Black people live and have since, you know, we started coming to Chicago. But not all of these, again, were slums. So like, you know, the Hyde Park area of Chicago, for example, where Barack and Michelle Obama live, Jesse Jackson live over there, Mrs. Minister Farrakhan live over there. You know, it's one of the nicest areas in the whole country. You know, in the heart of the South Side. But if you go literally like a 2 blocks, you know, west in Hyde Park, like you're straight in the ghetto. You know, and this is where again you get, you know, to your, you know, your commuter zone, your outer edges of the city, your suburbs, neighboring towns, where again you have a lot of people that depend upon the city for their lifeblood, but don't necessarily want to live in the city per se. And again, even though they're talking about Chicago, this has been applied to many other cities. As we talked about, Burgess is only focused there. There, like with any theory, and this was first originated like in the 1940s. Like any theory, there's going to be improvements on it. And that's all happened true with, you know, the concentric zone theory. And the concentric zone, and again, I'll get into the textbook, please. It'll have a breakdown and diagram there. Although you can go online and find that stuff too if you like. There's a diagram and breakdown of just how it's set up. And pretty much the further you away from the downtown center, the less jobs you have, the less good housing you're going to have, the more crime you're going to have. That was true in Chicago in 1940. It's true in Chicago in 2021. Now, as cities begin to develop, the concentric zone wasn't perfectly applied. That there were, even in Chicago, you would have other commercial centers outside of the central business district. So even though you have like, you know, downtown Atlanta, you also have areas of Atlanta, Bankhead and places like that where you still have like a lot of, you know, commerce and things going on. The residential patterns, you know, as opposed to like, you know, Pete, like I said before, Charles, as opposed to like, you know, the developers trying to like figure out what we're going to fit in the rich, the poor people and the Black people. Hell no. Those people get whatever is left over. The residential patterns are mainly determined by where we finna put the rich people. It is not just an urban evolution. Again, things evolve naturally without any kind of help or assistance. But there are very deliberate efforts to make sure. So again, Beacon Hill in Boston, in that downtown central business district, so the Gold Coast. So I told you where like Barack and Michelle and those people live in Chicago. Oprah Winfrey lives in the Gold Coast, just to give you some reference. So again, you know, Barack, Michelle, you know, Jesse, they at a certain level doing pretty well for themselves. Oprah's like in a whole nother stratosphere. So again, the Gold Coast, again, one of the nicest areas. You know, again, you'll see like, you know, nice shopping districts down there. Although again, it's getting buck wild. They were shooting, cats was getting shot and killed up in the Gold Coast this summer. It was crazy. You know, in the lower, like I said, Charles, the lower classes, they get what's left over. That's all true. Like again, in New Orleans, it's not an accident. Like the places in the neighborhoods and communities that were most ill affected by Hurricane Katrina, it's not an accident and coincidence that that's where the Black folks live. That was done very deliberately. So again, increasingly you will work from the multiple nuclei model, where you would not just have one central city district where all the business is done. It would be kind of spread around a little bit more. So even in cities like Chicago and New York have began to like adopt this model as well. Leave this up for just a moment. We're going to get bumped out in a moment, but I'm going to log back in. So I'll leave this up for a moment, and then we'll log back in at promptly 11:40. I will obviously won't keep you all very long, but I do want to make sure we get through the last few moments. And again, one of the things we've been talking about is not just the physical and social environment. What does it mean to be, a New Orleans citizen? What does it mean to not have those people in the city anymore? It's not only the economics that determine land use, but also the sentimentality. So, for example, we've seen this, for example, unfortunately, with even some of these, Confederate monuments and things like that, where for, a certain segment of the population that, promotes a certain symbolism for them. We see this as well, again, in cities all throughout, the country, where in Boston, again, like a very historical city, they could be making a lot of profit, Charles, on some of that, and people probably wanted to look, if we move these statues, dog, I could put 3 hotels here, but if you move those statues, it changes the nature of the city. And people come to that city, money, to see some of that history. Any questions on the Chicago School chapter before we go into urban planning? Again, we talked about, Charles, how the folks, the politicians and the developers were very deliberate about, how they structure the city. We'll look at that in more detail in the next chapter. Log back in at 11:40 sharp. I'll see y'all on the other side.